There is no weeding out process in the world anymore. You can't be at 10,000 feet and come up with the next great idea. There is no greater life upgrade than having your own jet. You don't even know what nice is until you've got your own jet. It's much easier starting a business when you're in your early 20s than it is later in life when you have obligations, because you'll do whatever it takes to get it done.
Welcome to another episode of Be Aware But Don't Care. Today, we sit down with entrepreneur, investor, and pilot Jason Crandall, who went from military school to building a multi-million-dollar iced tea empire, flying his own jet, and redefining what it means to live on your own terms. Discipline, drive, and doing the work. This one's packed with truth bombs you won't hear anywhere else.
Jason, tell us, how did you start? Tell us a bit about your upbringing and how stuff happened as you were growing up through, kindergarten, middle school, high school, and your family and whatnot, and how that kind of shaped you for the future, and maybe some learning moments there in those early years before you launched into your business career.
Sure, yeah. I grew up mostly in Atlanta, Georgia, and a lot of military schools, and stayed in military school all the way through college, all male military schools, which was a thing, and until I graduated in 1996, and that sort of changed after that. And when I got out of college at 21, I started selling iced tea.
Let's start a minute on the military school. Now, why did you go to military school? Was that your choice or your parents'?
It started off as my parents' choice, and this is when I was much younger. We lived in London, and a lot of back then,
Yeah. London,
boys
England.
and girls
London,
were
England, or London, Ontario?
London, England.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't born there. I was born in DC, but as a kid, we lived in London, and in London, when I was a kid in the early 80s when we lived there, boys and girls going to separate schools was very normal. And so I went to an all-male boarding school in London. And when my father got transferred back to the States, I was so used to that lifestyle that that's where I stayed.
Okay.
So I just kept going to military schools or all-male boarding schools. And by the time I graduated high school, it just felt so normal that I applied to a school called the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, which at the time was an all-male military school as well, and got accepted there. And that was kind of the only place I applied, and that's what I was comfortable with. And so I went there and stayed 4 years and graduated, and then didn't know what to do with my life. And so I moved. Well,
So
I didn't know what to do.
You didn't join the military, even
No, though that was my plan. When I graduated in 96, there were the Clinton cutbacks on the military were in full effect, and they were really not accepting too many people into the different branches. So a lot of guys got told, look, there's just no room for you. Have a nice life. My grandfather.
How did it shape you, Jason? I mean, how did, obviously a lot of discipline are built into a military school, a lot of fitness as well as academics. I mean, what lessons, important lessons did you learn through this?
It absolutely shaped my entire life. And in fact, I've been talking about this with my pilot buddies this morning, and it goes back to this, this Toronto Delta crash. And I trained with Delta late last year. And, I looked around the classroom, and I've never worked as a pilot, and I was by far the oldest at 51 years old, and most highest total time at 8,000 hours. I mean, by far the most oldest and most experienced pilot in the room.
So
I mean,
did you go just for your own training, or did you get hired by Delta?
No, I went to finish up my ATP.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was somewhat amazed at how young. I mean, it was a room full of kids.
Okay.
And, you may not want to put this in there at all, but in the video, but,
No.
I felt everyone was extremely inexperienced in that room to be flying airplanes with, 100 people on board.
No, I agree. I mean, I think, and I criticize the American system of get your commercial pilot's license and then become a flight instructor and fly until you get 1,500 hours. But, flying around in a small Cessna at 80 knots around the traffic pattern doesn't give you the experience to fly a 100-seater jet.
Well, and the one thing that military school that lifestyle taught me, or that the military used to teach all men in society, back when there was the draft, is everybody had to go to boot camp. And boot camp quickly exposes whether you're prone to a helmet fire in a stressful situation. And helmet fire is also called, spazzing out or
Yeah.
locking up or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that today's training in aviation, putting someone in a sim, that's not a life or death experience. You don't know that you can perform under pressure just because you're in a simulator, but the rules in the United States, and I'm sure in Europe as well, is, hey, if you can pass these tests, you're qualified. Well, no, that's bullshit. You are not qualified if you lock up under pressure,
Well, I'll
and a
tell you a
lot of
story.
people do.
I'll tell you a story. When I was 18, I had my private pilot's license, and I applied for a scholarship with British Airways, because at the time they were taking on guys out of high school with no flight experience and paying for all their training. So I went for the selection twice, didn't get through. And then eventually I found myself taking the exams, and I met some of these cadets from British Airways. And from an academic standpoint, they were far better than me. I mean, these guys would like read a book once and know it off by heart and go in there and get 100%. I was like an 80 to 90% guy. I'm not a 100% guy. And these guys, academically, great. But then when they got in the airplane and something went wrong or something happened which was out of, not in the book, they freaked out. Some of them freaked out. So British Airways soon realized that maybe getting guys out of high school and paying for all their training, even though academically they were far superior to people like me and you, wasn't the way. It was better to go and get guys which academically weren't as good, but had gone through the ropes themselves and gone over the obstacles of, making the money, getting through the training, going and flying all sorts of smaller airplanes and that before they get onto the bigger jet, and going through all this, because it would build character that when something did happen that was out of the ordinary, they had the character to deal with it.
Right. I've got the same stories from school, and my point is there is no weeding out process in the world anymore. To put someone under stress in corporate America or in government or any organization you can think of is very politically incorrect now. You are not allowed to yell at someone or call them names or do anything to see how they respond, and that's really the problem in aviation today. And I remember being in military school, and this was just military school. I mean, it was all male and it was pretty Spartan. But there were guys, and this isn't black and white. There were guys that were 4.0 academically amazing, and you see them get in a stressful situation, and they would just freeze. And I remember this one kid in particular that was dumber than a box of rocks, and no matter what you threw at this kid, he could keep going and performing and function. And nobody's exposed to this anymore in the world. And I was probably at the tail end of it growing up at the time that I did in my school, the Citadel. Right after I graduated, they lost a Supreme Court case and finally had to let women in. And to accommodate them, they had to change the standards completely in that school. And that place is not what it used to be. And to this day, it's politically incorrect in any organization to put someone under stress, to
Well, I'll
call
tell you
them
an
names.
interesting one. In the Maasai tribe, a young man, before he is allowed to date a woman, needs to kill a lion.
Yeah.
So
This is just male
Yeah.
101.
There seems to be no transition phrase from boy to man. And there's a book called Iron John, which was written by Robert Bly a few years ago. And he went out and he looked at the different tribes and cultures around the world. And he discovered that those cultures where there is either a ritual or some experience that a young boy needs to go through before he becomes a man is important. I mean, in my church, for example, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a lot of our young men go out on missions for 2 years. I've got two of my oldest boys, they 18, 19, they stopped their lives for 2 years, and they went out to teach the gospel. And they're knocking on doors, and they're trying to sell religion, which is really, really difficult to do. But I saw both my boys come back men. And that is an experience like joining the military, for example. For a young boy, you join the military or you go to a military school where they knock you into shape. They put you from that. You have that transition phase from going from boyhood to manhood. You kill the line, so to speak, and that's missing. I mean, now today in schools they give a trophy to everybody that participates, and so I mean, we had this once at a sports event in my church. My kids had trained for this running race, and they give out medals to everybody. I said, well, that's not right, because the kid that came in last didn't train and sacrifice the last few months training to try and win this race, and he gets the same medal my son got. That's not
There
fair.
is, there's no longer a weeding out process in the military. There is no weeding out process in the airlines. And I would say the last two aviation accidents, this Black Hawk one, and especially this Delta one. When I watched that video of that Delta plane landing in Toronto, I see a pilot that is having a helmet fire. That thing is dead on, not
Yeah, I
moving,
mean, I saw the plane was coming in. The rate of descent was too high. The nose
too
was too
high.
low. The nose was too low. There was no flare. It just flew straight into the ground.
That pilot was frozen, in my opinion, based on just that video. Maybe I'm wrong. I know we don't have the investigation yet, but we also don't have the pilots' names yet, which I think is silence is deafening. And in that video, it looks to me like that right main landing gear didn't even land on the runway because it came off immediately, like it sunk in the mud and just got ripped off. So, it looks like helmet fire to me. And based on my training with the airlines this year, looking around that room, I see a bunch of fat kids that are eating dessert every meal. None of them looked fit or tough or anything but looking for an easy job in life in a way that they can collect a check and just live for the
Well,
weekend.
my mantra, on my channel BizJet TV, and when I talk to people that want to buy an airplane and a private jet, I always say to them, I said, the pilot is more important than the plane. Let's worry about hiring some good pilots first, and then we'll get the plane. But you need to hire good people, pay them money, give them time off, and look after them, and get them trained in a certain way, and keep them trained in a certain way. Because otherwise, you can buy the most beautiful airplane in the world, but if you don't get the right pilot, and I just sold an airplane to a guy just before Christmas, and he's wanting to pay the pilots $130,000 a year, and I'm like, what? I said, private jet guys right now for that kind of airplane, that kind of, they're getting $350,000 to $400,000 a year. You can't pay them that money. But anyway, the airplane's sitting there now with no pilots. He didn't listen. I mean, I got my money for, buying the airplane for him and that. So I got paid. But, I told him all the way along, I said, we've got to hire these guys. I introduced him to two good guys. No, the plane's just sitting there in a hangar in Houston. And I'm just like, I'm flabbergasted. I mean, what's going on here? But you're right. I mean, and when we talk, and it's not only happening in the pilot world, it's happening in all worlds where these young people are not put through a process, which at the end of the day, it doesn't kill them. It doesn't hurt them. It builds character.
Yes.
It builds a strong foundation. And that is key to success in anything, whether you're playing a musical instrument, you're flying a plane, or even in sport these days. The sports people, I mean, I'm always baffled at Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player. There he is at 40 years old, still scoring goals, still working out like crazy, training 3-4 times a day, watching what he eats, going to bed at 9 o'clock at night every night. I mean, and still smashing records. And he's beating guys at 24, 25. Why? Because he's built that character into himself, which is not happening with a lot of these young sports people today. They come, they win a few matches, they win a few tournaments, and then they disappear off the map. Why? Because they lack that solid character foundation, which I think is key. But let's talk more about, so you finished this military school, and then what do you do work-wise? What happens to you in
So I started selling iced tea to restaurants was kind of my idea out of college to make money. And I grew up in North Atlanta. I mean, it wasn't a super fancy part of the world. I didn't know fanciness. I had nothing to lose and I just wanted to make money. Like my whole idea at 21 years old was, get rich or die trying, which was before, the whole 50 cent thing. But I wanted to make money and like every man does.
Yeah.
And I just hit the ground running. And, I have a 23-year-old son who I've given the same advice to is it's much easier starting a business when you're in your early 20s than it is later in life when you have obligations, because you'll do whatever it takes to get it done and you don't have much overhead or responsibilities. And he's following the same route. But for me, selling tea to restaurants, just learning how to sell, learning how to deal with people, learning how to deal with problems. And then, as you're selling, you learn new things, new ways of perfecting your business. And, when I sold my company 5 years ago, which is the same company I started when I was 21, I sold it when I was 45. We weren't even remotely doing what I was doing when I started out of college. It
So
was a
you
complete,
morphed and changed the business as
it
things.
morphed. I mean, every business does. And it's like advice I give to my son and even a lot of his friends is, you can't be at 10,000 feet and come up with the next great idea. You have to get involved with something and get deep into it and understand all the nuances of it in order to see the opportunities. So, you can't waste your life just waiting for something to come along or waiting for something that interests you. You don't know what interests you until you get deep into it.
Yeah, of
I mean,
course.
how many people can't tell one airplane from another until they, become pilots or whatever. And then they're like, oh, that's a Beechcraft Bonanza. Oh, that's a Cirrus. Oh, that's a Piper. It's really the same thing with life and business is you have to get deep involved in something in order to see the opportunities.
So let's talk about airplanes now. At some point in your business career, you started flying. Now, tell us why you started flying, because I think this is an interesting part of your story. Tell us
I
how
started flying
flying.
because flying commercials is garbage.
Okay.
It's absolutely the most difficult part of my life was calling on customers and going from city to city to city to see people. I mean, it's just impossible. And this was over 20 years ago.
Okay. So what did
And
you
it's
do to
way
solve
worse.
that problem then? Obviously, you didn't go and buy yourself a jet right away. What did you start with?
Cirrus.
Okay.
So Cirrus was brand new. This is the early 2000s. Cirrus was a new thing, and I went one day. In talking with my accountant, we were pretty profitable, and he was like, you should go buy an airplane. And really, I wasn't the kid that grew up dreaming about airplanes, but I did dream about the time savings and the ease of use. And you look into it just a little bit, and you realize there's 5,000 airports in the United States, and there's five next to every customer that I have. And I'm like, why don't can I just fly one of these little planes? Then you kind of get on Cirrus's website and then you start to, I'm like, I'm going to go take lessons. And I had my private pilot's license in 30 days.
Yeah.
Because I just trained every day.
Yeah.
And then I did my instrument rating in 2 weeks after that. And then I went and got this Cirrus and I was flying myself all over the place. And, I was easily doing 250, 300 hours a year one. And I've pretty much stuck to that 20 years later. And even though I'm in a CJ4 now. So I went from,
Okay. So how did the little Cirrus help you grow your business exponentially?
because at the time I was mostly Southeast grocery stores, so I would fly from Atlanta to Florida or South Carolina or Alabama. And it was almost like two visits a week to customers. And, I could pack all my samples, which were liquid. That wasn't an issue. And it just made, I mean, there is no greater life upgrade than having your own jet. And I say, even especially if you fly it yourself. Like I flew a friend from Scottsdale to Aspen last week, and he's flown private a lot, but he's never flown with a guy like me, where he pulled up, the plane's loaded and ready. And he's like, well, are we waiting on anybody? I'm like, no, let's go. And we just go. And he's like, that was the most amazing private flying experience I've ever had. And I think it is. Like if you can fly your own CJ4 at just anywhere you go at a moment's notice, like we're flying down to Miami here in a couple hours. I mean, it is the biggest life upgrade in the world.
Yeah,
I
of
don't
course,
care what anybody.
Yeah, you own your own jet. You fly it yourself. You can go when you want and with who you want.
I see these guys online, they post their Lamborghini or their Rolex, and I'm like, man, this child's play. You don't even know what nice is until you've got your own jet. And if you've got your own crew, like you were saying, and you can afford to house them, feed and water them, and have them at your beck and call, that's equal to just doing it yourself, which is what I do.
So you kind of saw that the airplane could help you as a business tool. And then you thought, well, I don't mind learning to fly myself. And then this passion suddenly kicked in for flying.
Well, once I did it, I loved it. I mean, the technicalities of being a pilot, like I said, I've never worked as a pilot, but I'm an ATP and I've got over 8,000 hours. And I love the process of being a pilot. Like I almost love it when it's IFR out and you're on the radio and things are just working like clockwork with everybody's on the same page on the radio. Like I almost like bad weather days because you can just feel that you feel that flow, that rhythm going. Whereas on VFR days, you're coming in and there's a million Cessnas in the pattern and whatnot. Anyway, I love the process. Is my point.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love being a pilot.
yeah.
I
And
love training. So I'm not the normal guy in that regard either. I mean, not every guy that can afford a jet really wants to go fly it, and I get that. I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, if you want to buy yourself a Gulfstream and you got a crew, I think that's freaking awesome too.
yeah,
That's
I
amazing
guess your background from the military schools helped you regiment yourself
for sure.
not only during the training, but also in the day-to-day operations of your jet. You're very sort of standardized and regimented because of the upbringing that you had.
For sure. I mean, a big motivator, even just in my diet and fitness routine, is keeping my medical for as long as I possibly can. I mean, I won't even take an Advil. Like, I just don't mess around with anything that would ever mess with a
Same here.
medical.
We don't take any medicine. I mean, when I was in Scottsdale the other week, I was playing pickleball against two of my sons, or 1-against-2. So dad's trying to, I was actually winning. And then this pickleball court wasn't leveled. So there was like a step and there was gravel. And I went out to hit the ball. And as I came back in, I tripped and hurt my arm. So my arm's kind of out for 3 weeks. I mean, it's just getting better. But I didn't have any x-rays. My wife's a herbalist. So she gave me some special ointment, had me take this stuff, gave me a special spinal flow treatment, which helps with aligning the body and that. And I'm just waiting for the thing to adjust itself, which it has done. And because I just refuse to take any medicine, because you don't need to. There's lots of alternatives out there which are more in tune with the human body than, and you need to look after your health. I mean, I see people my age are usually taking all these medicines and having operations and having pieces of their body taken out, and I haven't gone through any of that. I mean, in fact, I went to see a buddy of mine in Los Angeles, and Shahriar is an Iranian guy, and he and I met at high school in the international school in Milan 40 plus years ago. I hadn't seen him for 42 years. So I went to see him, friends reunited after 42 years. He said, "Hey, what are you doing? You look exactly the same."
There you go. That's good. That's a huge compliment, right?
So I said, "Okay, well, obviously we're doing something right here." I mean, obviously I don't look 15 anymore, but at 55, I'm doing all right for my age.
For sure.
But,
yeah.
A lot of it is what you do every day, looking after you. And that's part of be aware but don't care. In my book, there's a whole chapter on health, and a lot of that's been helped by my wife, because she had her journey. She had all sorts of problems that she solved through alternative therapies and herbalism and whatnot, and she cured arthritis and cancer. That she had both. She got rid of them. And they're both so-called incurable diseases. She's free from cancer. She's been 20 years free from cancer. And it's down a lot of it, diet, exercise,
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think so. It's what you're putting in, people put in their mouths, and they don't care. And I don't know why so many, FlexJet, NetJet pilots that I see, and I fly those a lot because a lot of friends have it, and I'll look at the cockpit, and these are, more times than not, they're the worst looking people I've ever seen in my life. Overweight.
In all fairness, I must say, United Airlines. No, is it United? Yeah, I think it's United Airlines. They offer free gym membership to their pilots.
Yeah, they should. This
is only a recent thing, though, since the COVID thing happened. Yeah. So they give them free gym membership. I don't know how that works, but I mean, that's part of the package, which I think is a smart move, because it just encourages, the crew, both the pilots and the flight attendants. Because flight attendants have to be fit too. Because if you have a situation like happened the other day in Toronto, you've got to evacuate the airplane quick. You've got to get those people off the airplane quick. You've got to be fit yourself to be able to do that. So you can't be overweight or anything like that. So you've got to really, look after yourself. But that's not only for who flies. I'd say in general, if you want to be fit at 80, 90 years old, it starts back when you're 40, when you're 30.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's just a lifetime thing. All of our bodies, we're all designed to be hunting our entire lives. You're not supposed to lay around and eat, candy. You're supposed to be working every day and suffering.
Let's go back into your drinks business. So the business grows over time, and you get to a point where you had the opportunity to exit. So
yes.
Tell us about that exit and what are you up to now?
The exit was, I would say, exiting a company, to me, that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Hiring investment bankers, accountants, going through the process of marketing your company to potential buyers, and having them come in and just dissect your entire life for 30, 40 days, all day, every day. My process took 2 years. because you get almost to the finish line and then they try to retrade you and whatnot. I had to walk away, and then they came back 3 months later, and we had two buyers all the way to the end, and we closed on the sale, and it was a very satisfying thing to do, to accomplish. And like I said, that was almost 5 years ago, and I exited. I chose to sell the company because I had been doing it my whole life since I was 21 years old, and I really kind of decided about age 42 that it was time, because I was just fed up with dealing with employees and customers, and that has kept me from starting another business or company, like
Yeah.
a real company, like that has employees and
Yeah.
customers. Like my motto in life is no employees and no customers. I just
Okay.
can't
Yeah.
deal with people. Whereas, like I said to my son, when you're in your 20s, you can deal with people all day long. I mean, you'll just suck it up and deal with them. But as you get older, you don't want to deal with people's bullshit anymore. So, especially customers. I mean, a lot of my customers were huge beverage companies like Coke and Pepsi and Walmart or whatnot, and they're head buying teams. They're people you don't have anything as a business owner. You have nothing in common with these people. I mean, as a buyer for these companies, it's not a high end job, and it became very difficult for me to maintain, to do the things that are required to keep a big piece of business, with companies that are buying millions of dollars a month of
Yeah.
stuff from you.
Yeah.
So I was happy to sell it. The private equity that bought it merged it with several other companies, and I still am an owner in it, although they don't ask me any questions,
So
never
you kept
have.
some shares. You kept some shares.
Yeah, and in fact, they've already sold it again, which I made money on, and then I still own a big chunk. I own a small chunk of the big company.
Yeah. Okay.
What they're doing, I have no idea. I mean, I'm assuming one day it'll sell again, and I'll make money again.
So every three
I
months
don't
they
care.
write you a check, basically.
Yeah, I don't care at this point. Like whatever.
Yeah. So what do
Um,
you do with the lump sum of money that you got? This money comes in, and then now, so you have an
so
exit,
I've
you make all this money. Then what do you do?
I've since then I've been mostly a full-time investor, which I was an investor. I was very interested in investing before that, so I'm very much into understanding stocks and bonds and how the market kind of flows. And I got really into building aircraft hangars because, of course, there's been a
Yeah.
shortage of that. I got involved in a project in Nevada. I'm midway on this project in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I've had nothing but offers on it
Yeah.
since I purchased it, really.
Wow. So you
And
haven't even
but
finished the project, and you got buyers already for the whole hangar.
buyers or renters, I mean, a couple of the local FBOs there want to take it off my hands because it's got a full fuel farm and everything in it as well.
Nice.
And it's got
Well,
a
they need.
20,000 gallon Jet A fuel farm, so they could take it from me and have it as just space to
Yeah.
put
Don't
their
sell it.
customers.
Hold on to it.
Um,
My
yeah.
advice: hold on to it for at least 10 years.
Yeah, I'm going to hold on to it. I mean, I'm either going to keep it because it's I've gone real high design with it. It's all cast in place concrete and glass. I mean, it's really beautiful. And Scottsdale Airport, I mean, if you're into aviation, in my opinion, that's the coolest airport in the world to be involved in. Everybody there is into airplanes and cars. And I mean, every hangar is over the top. They've got an architectural design committee. There's no metal buildings. It's just a beautiful place. And that airport, I mean, it's the only airport in the country that's, right in the middle of a mall and like an IMAX theater and a Costco and tons of restaurants and shopping. I mean, it's a pretty incredible place
Yeah, I was
that I
just there a
think,
few weeks ago, so I know what you're
yeah,
talking about. Yeah.
it's an amazing part of the world, Scottsdale, Arizona. So I'm really happy to be there, and everybody's been wonderful. And so I'm gonna keep finishing up that project and this project in Nevada, and I'm trying to do one in Miami. So I've gotten very into, to answer your question, real estate in hangars, as well as a lot of other real estate development, as well as just investor type, old man investor type stuff, retired guy investor stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You
So
know.
you freed up a lot of time basically, so you can enjoy your
Well, and
flying.
that's all the best part of life, of not having, I mean, you're freeing up your time. Yeah. Doing whatever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, as much as you want,
Yeah. Okay.
to
So
quote.
let's go to something else, Jason. So you a reader? Do you read a lot?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So what are the 4 or 5 books that you've read over time that have influenced you the most?
Guns, Germs, and Steel is a great book about sort of the evolution of humans. I don't agree with what the author concludes, but I'm impressed that he took the project on. And it's not really a new book, but it really begins to shed a lot of light on even the things we were talking about a minute ago,
And
and
history.
human evolution, why the world is the way it is right now, why is the United States so dominant, and the geography that plays into to all the parts of the world. And I think, it really helps see helps me see a lot of things in light. And I think that Corona accelerated, like we were talking earlier, like the best places in the world to be have been exposed.
Yes.
We know the whole world knows where these places are, and the real estate in those places is growing exponentially.
Thanks to these as well.
Yeah. Thanks to social media and everyone having a camera in their pocket. So, and the not so great places in the world is where and it's been going on since the beginning of time, where people can't afford maybe South Florida, they're moving to more rural Georgia or rural South Carolina or rural Alabama. I mean, we're doing housing developments in Mobile, Alabama, for example, which historically has never been a high demand place, but it is now because a
Is it
lot of people.
Alabama, that state where you don't need planning permission?
No, you need planning. It's not as strict as, say, Miami Beach. Miami Beach is impossible. I mean, everything in Miami Beach where I live is old. It all needs to be ripped down, but they won't allow you to do it.
Okay.
So, um, you know, I think that the politics of the Northeast United States, specifically Illinois, New York, New Jersey, working people that actually work hard want to keep their money and have something to live for, and so they're leaving and they're moving to a place like Mobile, Alabama, where a lot of companies are moving, and they're leaving places like Illinois and leaving behind, people that live off the system. And that's what's really hurting a city like Chicago, which I love. Chicago, it's a world-class city, or it used to be anyways, but I go there now and it's not what it was 10 years ago, you know and it's the politics have just crushed it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember when we had this recent election here in England, um, which happened on the Thursday. Client of mine rings me up, was relocating to Cairo from England, needed a jet to get there with his family. They were taking the dog with them and 20 suitcases. So I organized the trip. I drove down to Farnborough Airport, met them there, made sure everything was okay. Now, it was interesting. I was there. I got there about an hour and a half before they arrived, and just to make sure everything was in check. And the amount of people that were arriving with dog, cat, suitcases, leaving on large jets. And I'm like, what's going on? A Saturday morning, so busy. And it turns out that these people were relocating. So my client arrives and I said, oh, yeah, I'm leaving the UK and I'm shutting my business down here. I'm moving. And a lot of friends of mine are doing the same. I said, well, I can see the traffic this morning and there's all Global Expresses and G550s leaving. The millionaires and the multimillionaires are leaving the UK because of the new policies of the new government, which are anti-business. And the other trend is they've got, I think it's 1.3 people leaving a minute that are leaving the UK. And so the government turns around and says, oh, but we've also got people moving to the UK. But what they're not telling you is look at the GDP of these people leaving and look at the GDP of the people that are coming into the country. They're coming in from third world countries. And so the smart ones are leaving and they're replaced by people that aren't as smart and not as educated. So how are they going to have an effect on the economy? The economy is going to do this in the next 5 to 6 years because all the smart ones are the ones with, the money to create the businesses which create the jobs, which puts money in people's pockets, are leaving. I don't say everybody's leaving, but a good percentage of them are, and they're being replaced by people that aren't going to bring value to the market. And this is not a good thing. And today, with these things, you can, if things aren't going well where you live, you can research. Like I was talking to a lady the other day, her son moved to Nepal from England. 23 years old. I said, well, how come he ended up in Nepal? Well, he drove around on his motorbike, different countries and that, and he ended up in Nepal. He likes it there. He's spending $300 a month to live. And he's got a nice apartment. That's all included. Food, blah, blah, blah. And now he's teaching English as a foreign language. He says, what do I want to go back to England for? I have a really nice life out here. It's good weather, nice people, good food. And, I'm only spending $300 a month. The rest of the money in my pocket.
Yeah.
But, and he found out about Nepal by doing his research, going on YouTube and whatnot. And, and this information is available to anybody today. I mean, back in my day, you had to go to the library and get a book out, and still you can't really tell from a book. Today, you can type in what's life like in Nepal for an expat, and there'll be like 20 people on YouTube telling their story and showing you how they do.
It's saving the world. I mean, everyone with a camera in their pocket is what is saving the world. It's exposing corruption. It's giving people the information they need to make the decisions they need to make, and it's changing the world.
Citizen journalist, I call it. Citizen journalist is saving the world.
Yeah, it's what this world needed. It's what I've been voting for since I was a kid. Is finally happening right now. I mean, this is needed. This since my first election was 1992, and I voted for what I believed. What's going on now, I was hoping would happen then.
Yeah,
I mean, this has been and change takes decades in the United States. It doesn't take months, and it's taken decades to, this things that Ross Perot, for example, was preaching in 1992 is the same stuff that Trump's saying now. But he finally was the guy to actually make it all happen.
Yeah. So let's go back to books. So you talked about guns,
germs, and steel, another one to that. And this one has probably been in a lot of book burnings, but it's a great book. It's called Camp of the Saints, and it's a story about exactly what we're talking about right now. But it was written in the 70s, and it's about the third world invading the West through liberal politics, and it's amazing to read simply because it was written in the 70s and they saw it then, and it's been going on for that long. So that's another great book to read, or you can just pay attention to what's going on in the world right now, and the same exact thing is going on in the West.
Interesting, because you mentioned two books that other people haven't mentioned, so keep going. What any other suggestions?
No, those are the two most recent that have popped into my brain.
Because most people mention Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which
see, I don't like to read about things I already know about. I mean, I don't know about. I think understanding money is a very basic concept. I don't need to read books on it. If you can stay out of debt and think long term, I think it's real hard to mess up your life. Debt.
As I was told very early, said, money's very simple. It's all about delivering value to the marketplace. And if you're not, what can you do to increase your value?
Right. I think making money, I've always been pretty good at it. And I'm involved in a debt company now, and we do a lot of lending. And my son works for this company, and I say, one of the biggest benefits of you working for this company is learning what not to do with money and learning how not to be. Don't be that guy that's financing a Lamborghini and an antique sword collection. It's going to take you down. And so a lot of those books, they cover a lot of basics. So yeah, I don't get into finance books so much. Yeah. I like more history.
Do you read any fiction?
No, not really.
Okay.
No.
Now let's talk about more about the world here, Jason. Now we've talked about the crisis of men. Okay, we kind of touched that subject. What trends do you see in business that are there now and opportunities for the future?
I mean, I'm very big on the global economy. I believe in the global economy, and I've been saying for years, I think over the next century, America is going to become the Aspen, Colorado of the world. And if you don't know Aspen, it is just such a bubble of wealth and purity in terms of the environment. Not that I'm an environmentalist, but America is where the smart, rich people of the world are going to flock to, and you see it right now.
Yes, I agree.
The poor will be relegated to the third world.
I'll tell you an interesting thing that I've noticed, Jason. Now, back in the day when Europeans were leaving Europe to emigrate to America, you had two groups. You had the Spaniards, which are after the gold, and they were driven by, let's go and get the gold out of Mexico kind of thing. And then you had the Pilgrims in England, which were moving because they wanted religious freedom. There's all this religious movement happening, mainly in the UK. They translated the Bible into English. Everyday people started to read the Bible. Then they broke away from the Catholic Church. They created Protestant church. So there was a bit of a religious, but a lot of people were being burnt, killed, tortured. So they said, well, there's this new world. We'll just jump on a boat and go. And interestingly enough, North America has prospered financially a lot more than Southern America, because they were looking for God, not for money. And if you search for the kingdom of God first, money will follow as a consequence. And so what I'm noticing now, and this is why I have hope for America, even though there's a lot of bad things happening in America, like that's happening here. I mean, the fastest growing religion in Europe right now, you know what? Which is the fastest growing religion in Europe? No religion.
Muslim.
No
Religion.
religion.
Okay.
No religion.
No religion.
No religion. And so as you see Europe moving into socialism, which means there's no God, that's what socialism puts man at the center of the universe. Now you don't have that in your life. You have no moral compass. So you're going to get up to all sorts of things. But my hope, and I'm not American. I don't live in America, but I mean, it seems to me that there's more people now in America that are praying. I mean, this thing that happened to Trump when they tried to shoot him and they hit his ear and he happened to turn it. I mean, that was a miracle itself.
Incredible.
Now, whether it was an angel or, however we can get esoteric or whatever, but it was a miracle that he didn't get killed.
Yep.
Okay.
Changed the world. I mean, would have changed the course of history.
Yeah. So now there are people in America today that are praying. Now, doesn't matter what faith you are, but they are praying to a higher power. And that's the foundation of America, was based on these Christian principles. And Judean, the Judeo-Christian foundation of America is there, where, even on your dollar note, it says, "In God we trust." And I think there's been a revival of this kind of thing in America. And that's probably why you're starting to turn. And that's probably why a lot of not only wealthy people, but good people are flocking to America, because they realize that the rest of the world doesn't have this kind of foundation, in particular here in Europe, where, no religion is the fastest growing religion. People are moving towards, and will be even more, I think. And you're right. And I'm saying this, and I'm not an American. People are moving towards America because of this.
And I think the back to what we were saying earlier, the phone in the pocket of everybody, and it's so easy to expose. I could argue to just to counter your point a little bit. I could argue that it's never really the number of religious people hasn't gone anywhere. It's just the media that makes you think they have, and the exposure of the corruption that's been going on for decades in this country because of the internet. The internet has exposed it. It's propagated it, and it's also exposed
I get
itself.
your point. It's like, people, they used to be able to pray in schools. Now they're not. Well, it's coming back now, but the people are still praying. They're just doing it at home. Before they were doing it at home and doing it in school. Now they're going to be able to do it in school again. So yeah, you're probably right. I mean, but because this is getting out there now, it's inspiring other faith sort of based people to say, you know what? I mean, I take, for example, the homeschooling movement. My wife and I have homeschooled all four of our children, oldest being 24, youngest 17. And, we started homeschooling because our first son was very smart. So we thought if we sent him to school, we'd slow him down. And back then, homeschooling movement wasn't big like it is today. But a lot of people were motivated to homeschool their children because of what's happening in schools. And, the moral compass has been thrown out the window, and they're teaching all sorts of weird stuff. And they didn't want their children exposed to this. But there are some countries in Europe where homeschooling is illegal. In Germany, if you homeschool, you get put in prison. In Sweden, the same. So there are families from these countries that have moved to other countries where homeschooling is legal. Now, America being one of these, the UK being another. I don't know how long homeschooling will be legal here in the UK, seeing how things are going. But, these families are moving to where they can freely educate their children. And I think this is really, really important. We need to look after our young ones because they're the future.
Yeah. I mean, everything, even in science, goes from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. And it's true with humanity, and it's true with everything. People will leave, and I welcome it. I mean, I'm not anti-immigration. I wish we could trade every whiny, mooching liberal in the United States for a hardworking Mexican guy. I wish it would a 1-for-1 trade. Hell, I would even do a 10-for-1 trade. I mean, I think this country is built on hardworking, disciplined people, and I think it's going to come back. I think I was
agree.
really.
I mean, I'm all for immigration, but it needs to be legal. I mean, you need to vet the people. You need to say, okay, we need 100 of these people. Let's choose the best 100 and bring them in and give them an opportunity. I think that's the way. But letting these people, I mean, it's happening here in England. We've got them where my mother lives in Eastbourne, which is right in the southern part of the UK. They've got boats coming in every day from France, illegals, 40, 50 men coming onto the shore every single day. And the government are taking them, putting them in the Holiday Inn, giving them 3 meals a day, giving them a cell phone and money. And they're calling their buddies, and and the French are letting them out of their prisons and putting them on boats, because let's face it, it costs a lot of money. I mean, I remember reading about it costs $75,000 a year to keep someone in prison in the United States, and I should imagine it's similar in Europe. So
For sure.
if I've got a prison with 3,000 prisoners and I can just let them all out and put them on a boat and send them to England, because they'll have them there, that's 3,000 people times $75,000. I'm saving a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the problem you've had with the U.S.-Mexican border has been happening here. It's just happening very quietly. The main press aren't covering the story, and they're just letting them in. And then I always say, what's the military for? The military is there to stop people from invading your country. If Winston Churchill were alive today and he saw these people coming onto the shores of Britain and they're just letting them in and putting them in, I mean, what's the point in having an Air Force and Navy just to send them to Afghanistan to go and protect Afghanistan, the Ukraine, and whatever, when we're letting people invade this country?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you're making a good move in life.
Yeah,
you're doing the right thing.
And then people complain in the UK. I've got friends of mine saying, "Oh, my son moved to America, or my son moved to Dubai, or my son's moving to Singapore with his family because there's more opportunity over there. I'm going to have to go and see them every year. Won't see my grandchildren." Well, I wonder why.
Yeah, I love Dubai. I think it's beautiful. I would move there if I wasn't an American and it wasn't on the other side of the world. I have hope for America now, and the system here works. It just takes decades, and it makes sense why it takes decades. And I don't think there's ever been a better system, and it's not a perfect system, but there's never been a better system that can completely upend the bureaucracy and make change. I mean, you can actually do it in the United States. You can lawyer up.
And also South America is starting to wake up now and clear up their act. I mean, Brazil, Argentina, other countries, El Salvador, they've been accepting Bitcoin and that. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, that's a great story. I hope they can, continue and build the infrastructure they need to build to attract business and keep that place. You got to attract business. You got to have roads. You got to have electricity. You got to have security. You got to have, or your country's not going to make it. And that's all they need.
And the thing is, Jason, it appeals to the young people. The young people are more, they were born with these phones. So for them to understand the blockchain and cryptocurrency and whatever, it's easier for them than maybe for you and I, which didn't grow with these phones. Even though you and I understand these things because we read and are informed. But, the younger people have grown up with these things. And so if they see that El Salvador is pro-Bitcoin, they're going to move there.
It's a cool move.
They're going to take their money and they're going to create jobs.
It's a smart move on their part, for sure.
So
they're trying.
That's where, the world is a stage these days and information is at everyone's fingertips. And the world is becoming more transparent. So, you can really take more control of your life today. And I think that's, really, really important. Jason, in closing, any particular message you want to send out there, and how can people reach you if they wanted to get in contact with you?
I'm on Instagram, Jason Crandall 1. I'm doing all my, I'm filming the construction of this hangar because it's such a unique project. So I'm posting videos on that every week, and that's probably the best way.
Good. And any message for people in closing? What would be your number one advice to a young person that's been watching this?
Get to work. You don't have time to backpack across Europe or go be a lift operator at the ski resort. Get to work. Learn something and get to work. Go skiing when you're retired.
Great advice, Jason. Thank you very much. Everybody, you're listening here to Be Aware But Don't Care. We're going to take you here into quantum action to really make that difference in the world. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. Share it with your friends. We need to get the word out there about being aware but don't care and really taking control of your life and making a difference to the world. Thank you. That's all from Fabrizio Poli here on Be Aware But Don't Care, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Fabrizio.